Study section 3. The uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. Introduction. The uterus is a female reproductive organ which shelters the fetus during pregnancy. The ovaries are the female reproductive organs that contain the ova. The ovaries are the female pelvic reproductive organs that house the ova and are responsible for the production of sex hormones. They are paired organs located on either side of the uterus within the broad ligaments below the uterine fallopian tubes. The ovaries are responsible for housing and releasing ova or eggs necessary for reproduction. In this study section, you will learn about the uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. Learning outcomes. At the end of this study section, you should be able to describe the position, organs in relationship with the uterus, the ligament that support the uterus, and structure. 2. Explain the functions, organs in relations with, and the structure of the uterus tubes. 3. Explain the position and function of the ovaries. 4. Discuss the female cycle, the blood and nerve supplied, and the amniotic drainage. The uterus. Functions. The uterus shelters the fetus during pregnancy. It prepares for this possibility each month, and it expels the uterine content following pregnancy. Position. It is situated in the cavity of the true pelvis, behind the bladder, and in front of the rectum. It leans forward, which is known as antevaction. It bends forward on itself, which is known as anteflexion. Organs in relation. Anteriorly, the uterovesical pouch and the bladder. Posteriorly, the rectouterine pouch of Douglas and the rectum. Laterally, the broad ligaments, the uterine tubes and the ovaries. Superiorly, the intestines. Inferiorly, the vagina. Supports. The uterus is supported by the pelvic floor and maintained in position by several ligaments. The most important are the transverse cervical ligaments, or the cardinal ligaments, or McEnroe ligaments, the uterosacral ligaments, the pubocervical ligaments, the broad ligaments, the round ligaments, the ovarian ligaments. Diagram of the uterus and fallopian tube. The non-pregnant uterus is a hollow, muscular, pear-shaped organ situated in the true pelvis. It is 5.5 cm long, 5 cm wide, and 2.5 cm in depth, each wall being 1.25 cm thick. The cervix forms the lower third of the uterus and measures 2.5 cm in each direction. The uterus consists of the following parts. The body or corpus makes up the upper 2/3 of the uterus. The fundus is the domed upper wall between the insertions of the uterine tubes. The conwal are the upper outer angles of the uterus where the uterine tubes join. The cavity is a potential space between the anterior and posterior walls. It is triangular in shape, the base of the triangle being uppermost. The isthmus is a narrow area between the cavity and the cervix, which is 7 mm long. It enlarges during pregnancy to form the lower uterine segments. The cervix or neck protrudes into the vagina. The upper half, being above the vagina, is known as the supravaginal portion, while the lower half is the infravaginal portion. The internal OS is the narrow opening between the isthmus and the cervix. The external OS is a small round opening at the lower end of the cervix. The cervical canal lies between these two ora and is a continuation of the uterine cavity. This canal is shaped like a spindle, narrow at each end and wider in the middle. The layers. The uterus has 3 layers, of which the middle muscle layers is by far the thickest. Perimetrium. The outer layer of peritoneum It is a double serous membrane, an extension of the peritoneum. The endometrium forms a lining of ciliated epithelium on a base of connective tissue or stroma. In the uterine cavity, this endometrium is constantly changing in thickness throughout the menstrual cycle. The epithelial cells are cubical in shape and deep down to form glands which secrete alkaline mucus. Urometrium or muscle coat is thick in the upper part of the uterus and is pressile in the isthmus and cervix. It is the middle and muscular larger consisting of longitudinal, oblique, and circular muscle. The outer layer is formed in longitudinal fibers. Oblique muscles are arranged in criss-cross fashion to enhance control of hemorrhage. Its fibers run in all directions and interlace to surround the blood vessels and lymphatic, which pass to and from the endometrium. Circular muscles allow cervical dilatation as longitudinal muscles are pulled up during uterine contractions and retractions of muscles. In the cervix, the muscle fibers are embedded in collagen fibers, which enable it to stretch in labor. The uterine tube functions. The uterine tube propels the ovum towards the uterus, receives the spermatozoa as they travel upwards and provide a site for fertilization. It supplies the fertilized ovum with nutrition during its continued journey to the uterus. Position. The uterine tubes extend laterally, form the contour of the uterus towards the side walls of the pelvis. They arc over the ovaries. The fringe ends ovary near the ovaries in order to receive the ovum. Relations: anteriorly, posteriorly, and superiorly, the peritoneal cavity and the intestines. Laterally, the side walls of the pelvis. Inferiorly, the broad ligaments and ovaries lie below the tubes. Medially, the uterus lies between the two uterine tubes. Supports the uterine tubes are held in place by their attachments to the uterus. Diagram of four portions of the uterine: the interstitial portion, the isthmus, the ampulla, the infundibulum. Structure: each tube is 10 cm long. The lumen of the tube provides an open pathway from the outside to the peritoneal cavity. The uterine has four portions. The interstitial portion is a 1.25 cm long, lie within the wall of the uterus. Its lumen is 1 mm wide. The isthmus is another narrow part which extends for 2.5 cm from the uterus. The ampulla is the wider portion where fertilization usually occurs. It is 5 cm long. The infundibulum is the funnel-shaped fringe and which is composed of many processes known as fimbrage. Layers. The lining is a mucous membrane of ciliated cubical epithelium which is thrown into folds known as pilicae. These folds slow the ovum down on its way to the uterus. Beneath the lining is a layer of vascular connective tissue. The muscle coat. This consists of two layers, an inner circular layer and an outer longitudinal layer, both of smooth muscle. The peristaltic movement of the uterine tube is due to the action of these muscles. The tube is covered with peritoneum. Blood supply. This is from the uterine and ovarian arteries, returning by the corresponding veins. Lymphatic drainage. This is to the lumbar glands. Nerve supply. This is from the ovarian plexus. The position of the ovaries. The ovaries are paired organ located at either side of the uterus within the broad ligaments below the fallopian tubes. The ovary is within the Evians fossils. Functions. The ovaries are responsible for housing and releasing ovule or female eggs necessary for reproduction. Gross structure of the ovary. The ovaries are small, oval-shaped and grayish in color with an uneven surface. The size of an ovary depends on a woman's age and hormonal status. They are approximately 3 to 5 cm in length during childbearing years and become much smaller and the atrophic once menopause occurs. The ovaries are covered by a modified peritoneum. The gross structure of the ovary. Microscopic structure. A cross-section of the ovary reveals many cystic structures that vary in size. These structures represent ovarian follicle at various stages of development and degeneration. Ovarian ligaments. Several paired ligaments support the ovaries, namely, the ovaries ligaments connect the uterus and ovary. The suspensory ligament of the ovary, infundibulum pelvic ligament, attaches the ovaries to the pelvic side wall. This larger structure also contains the ovarian artery and vein, as well as nerve supply to the ovary. The posterior portion of the broad ligaments, the mesovarium, which supports the ovary and houses its arterial and each month, the ovaries go through a series of stages depending on stimulation by the anterior pituitary hormones, the follicle stimulating hormones FSH, and the luteinizing hormone LH. A typical female cycle lasts 28 days. However, this can range from 21 to 35 days. The ovarian cycle has two distinct phases: the follicular phase, days 1 to 14, and the luteal phase, days 14 to 28. The follicular phase is characterized by follicle development and growth, the goal being that one follicle matures and releases an egg at the time of ovulation, around day 14 of the female cycle. The remaining immature follicles go through stages of degeneration up until day 28, when the cycle repeats itself. The egg that is released is picked up by the fimbriae of the uterine tube, and the egg is transported towards the uterus. If fertilization does not occur, the egg degenerates and menstruation occurs. The remaining immature follicles go through stages of degeneration up until day 28, when the cycle repeats itself. The egg that is released is picked up by the fimbriae of the uterine tube, and the egg is transported towards the uterus. If fertilization does not occur, the egg degenerates and menstruation occurs. Nerve supply. Nerve supply to the ovaries runs with the vasculature through the suspensory ligaments of the ovary. Entry the ovary at the ileum. Supply is through the ovarian, hypogastric, and aortic plexuses. Blood supply and venous drainage. Blood supply to the ovary from the ovarian artery. Both the right and left arteries originate directly from the descending aorta. The ovarian artery and vein enter and exit the ovary at the ileum. The left ovarian vein drains into the left renal vein, and the right ovarian vein empties directly into the inferior venoal cava. Lymph drainage of the ovary is primary to the lateral aortic nodes. However, the iliac nodes are also involved.